because the process has been validated. So having a proof of concept, having an ability to test your outcome, is it truly the outcome that you want? And sometimes you're going to find out that, I think we need to shift and move towards this outcome today because it's a faster ROI. And then move on to maybe something that's more technical. But the biggest thing is to how do we improve outcome is by knowing that the system, solution, design, implementation has been validated. So really, what is artificial intelligence? You know, a lot of people are looking at Gen AI and saying, oh my gosh, artificial intelligence is here. No, artificial intelligence has been here for 20 years, okay? It's a different word today, okay? But what is generative AI? Well, in order to get generative AI, in order for Clara to provide information, there had to be data collected to provide her something to analyze and to recreate an answer based on the question that may be asked, okay? So artificial intelligence is machines that mimic human intelligence and cognitive functions, such as problem solving, okay? That's artificial intelligence. We know what that is. But then again, you have machine learning, okay? What is machine learning? And what's a subset of AI, okay? Well, along with machine learning, we have deep learning, okay? We haven't got to Gen AI yet, okay? Where's Gen AI come in? Well, it has to come after you have the intelligence, you actually have the learning models, you have maybe the neural networks to be able to understand and decide on the data, and then you've got generative AI, which is a branch of deep learning. So just because Gen AI is popular in the news today doesn't mean that we're in the AI age. We've been in the AI age for a long time. This generative AI allows us to do things based on textual or voice prompts and commands and regenerate a response based on data that's been collected and everything. And we'll demo that a little bit later as well. Today, from 3:30 to 4 in here, there'll be a demo for Clara. And if you want to ask her some questions, we're going to ask some questions. It's still in development side of it, but it has been implemented and is in a formal production. I'll show you something on that here in a little bit. But out of all of this, one of the big things in order to collect the data a lot of times is called computer vision. Well, what is computer vision? Well, computer vision is a form of data insights or data sensors, like a video sensor, an IoT sensor, that may need to be used to collect certain information. So let's take connected transportation across RTP. Well, if you have connected transportation, you've got to connect the data. Sometimes you've got to connect and collect visual data from intersections, okay? Traffic patterns, accidents, pedestrian crossing, pedestrian deaths, pedestrian injuries, accident injuries. All that data is important, but computer vision helps you see. So not only do computers and so forth enable you to derive meaningful information, the computer vision enables you to see, observe, and understand. So another branch of AI, but using video sensors rather than a IoT mechanical sensor. But can you put those two together? Of course you can. We have what we call sensor fusion. We can take an active sensor, a water sensor, pair it with a video clip of an area where there's rain to visually validate, oh, the sensor says water is rising. Picture says, oh my God, it is rising. Get out there and block it off. Okay, so you have immediate validation rather than having to send maybe somebody out there or read a meter, whatever the process is for that. But some examples of computer visions are basically really image classification, object detection, object tracking, retrieving information. And even today, out of computer vision, now we have a derivative of Gen AI and computer vision called image chat. Image chat. Yeah, you can take that image and through a textual response, either non-asked or automated, can give you a textual response based on the information in that video. Utilizing Gen AI, we can pull it out and say at an intersection, it can say that say there was incident or a near miss of a pedestrian in a car at an intersection, the Gen AI could say, immediately put up a textual response based on information that's already in the data, again, collected, artificial intelligence, and say that, oh, this intersection has had 22% increase in accidents in the last year. Okay, based on the accident data, it may output that information. Or you may be able to just do a quick text to that image and say, oh, how many pedestrians crossed at this intersection over the weekend because you had an event. Well, immediately it could display that based on visual information. So it's important to understand that visual information is important and is a tool to collect and to collaborate amongst the cities, whether it's identifying something as a car or identifying it as a bicycle or a pedestrian. This video clip is in Matthews, actually. This weekend we did a demonstration of traffic, showing the traffic path, the number of cars in the intersection, the occupancy, any wrong-way drivers, what's the performance of that intersection. Because the problem is, a lot of times with an intersection, you can have someone sit there doing a clicker, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 clickers, east, north, whatever it may be, and eventually there's going to be some biasing in the data. My finger's tired. I'm not going to collect any more of it. So you don't have complete data. So maybe a video sensor that's not going to go to sleep or take lunch break can collect that information better for you in some cases, some not. So what are some of the use cases within a smart community? These are just some ideas, things that we work with, pretty much on a daily basis with different companies. Public spaces, arenas. What are we doing to provide a better, safer experience in an arena? Is it utilizing AI for gun detection? One of our AI vendors out there that are very popular for gun detection, utilizing AI technology. I believe it's Houston is putting that in actually very soon, or it's in the process right now. Other stadiums already have it in. Waterways, law enforcement correctional facilities, road networks, education facilities, car parks, bridges, tunnels, public transit. Can you use computer vision and AI on a bus? Sure. You can understand the traffic path of that bus, the speed of the bus, validate times to an application where they should be. Those are a couple different things. Warehouse logistics. How do you use AI to improve your traffic patterns around warehouse and logistic areas where you have maybe not the right road infrastructure for these large 48-foot trailers that will take shortcuts and go through different areas where they don't belong. Well, you need to know that data. Are we creating our own traffic patterns because of what we're trying to limit through traffic control? Another one in public transit might be people and facility safety. Rail lines, operational efficiency, traffic flow analysis, rolling stock predictive maintenance. Maintenance you can run based on the data that you're going to collect. How about airport? We do a lot of different things at the airport for passenger and people experience. TSA is doing a lot, believe it or not, from passenger experience in working, and Dell's working with them on a federated learning application to help provide better services for customers, okay? Believe it or not, security also has to be paired, with convenience, with the experience. Otherwise, you end up having chaos develop. People get upset. You get fights. Why? Because they're irritated, because the process didn't work. And we're all frustrated. We all don't want to go through the airport anyway. Critical infrastructure. What about our utility, power plants? What's happening? Shotgun detection. Is somebody trying to shoot out a transformer? Can we use AI to listen? Yes. Make clarification, bring in video sensors. But one of the one of the easiest use cases that can be done has been a program that's been around since the 1990s over in Europe. And that's called Vision Zero. A lot of different cities across the United States are developing a Vision Zero program, and it's took about 10 years, 14 years for the US to kind of get behind this. And what Vision Zero strategy basically is, the goal is to eliminate all pedestrian deaths. There's approximately 12 deaths per 100,000 pedestrians in a city. And last year it went up 16%. Okay? So we have a challenge. We have a challenge because of technology has created a bigger challenge. And what is that? How many people do you see walking down the sidewalk with their eye on their phone and they walk into a pole, or they walk out in front of a car at an intersection? So can you use computer vision and AI to help eliminate that? We have a project, one of our partners, University of South Florida, who implemented AI at an intersection to look at that specific thing. If there are a lot of students heading towards the intersection, not paying attention, let's delay the signal. Let's create an audible talk down or a text to voice alert saying, hey, pay attention, and try to at least mitigate those pedestrian deaths. So it's important that we understand that it is getting worse because of speed limits. Sometimes it's traffic design. Sometimes it's simply as cutting a 4-lane highway down to maybe a 2-lane with a divider to allow pedestrians a safe zone as they're crossing. Okay, that may be a necessity, and there are some states that do that, but you don't know that if you're not tracking or sharing Vision Zero progress. Is there a collaborative dashboard within the triangle that can show everybody what improvements are happening, what is happening? Also, engaging the community, developing a framework to assess strategy effectiveness, measure and share equity-related priorities, update the plan to reflect emerging priorities and learnings. Okay? Data is not static. Data changes, results changes. Just look at what's happened to the world pre-pandemic. The data insights we had pre-pandemic are totally different than post-pandemic. We learned a lot because of the pandemic. We learned a lot about traffic patterns, believe it or not, because of the pandemic. Okay? What was working and what wasn't working. So there is an important process because data insights change over time. So you have to evaluate. So some of the success that we've seen in some of the larger cities like Seattle DOT, a 4-mile corridor, they did some insights and traffic monitoring, and you see before and then after. They were able to decrease crashes by 16%. Okay, decreased total crashes 40%, 1,700 people injured during a 10-year period. Injury crashes were down 30%. Bike and pedestrian crashes down 15%. And that was purely by changing from a 4-lane to dual lanes or turn lane, but had a divider that allowed you to, more time for a pedestrian to get across, okay? One of the biggest challenges with intersections and pedestrian safety is the traffic signals are set based on experience, based on traffic flow, sometimes the speed, right? And then when a pedestrian crosses, they push that button or it automatically times and says, okay, walk. It's timed based on normal things. But what happens if somebody's crossing that intersection in a wheelchair? Would you think that they would need a little bit more time to cross and not get caught out in the last lane as the light changes? And that's unfortunately what happens a lot of times. So how can we use computer vision to look at somebody's in the crosswalk in a wheelchair, change the timing of the signals, and make it a little bit longer for that person? New York City traffic and bicycle lanes, they did an evaluation and said, if we just widened our bicycle lane a little bit, we put bicycle lanes in certain other areas that needed to be, could we cut bicycle or pedestrian fatalities or deaths? And they said, yes. Number of crashes per year down 49%. Okay? But the only way they knew how to do that was with data. And with the right data. GIGO. Okay? Can't have garbage in to get something positive out if it's not the right data. So garbage in, garbage out is an important consideration when you're doing it. One thing I noticed in the World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims, November 19th, I know Raleigh's listed on that website. I guess University of North Carolina actually had a research was referenced this. some of this, I believe. It was 1,784 people killed in North Carolina roads in 2022. I mean, that's a lot. Okay? Not all pedestrians, but a certain amount of them, again, pretty consistent all across the United States, say probably increased 16%, so you have 14, 15% per thousand, you know, that are, 12 deaths per 100,000. So insights are important. So how we collect those insights is important, is having the video sensor, computer vision, the analytic. Maybe it's parking enforcement. Maybe you've got people parking in an area that's a delivery zone certain days of time and other parking. How do you identify that? Well, AI can tell you that you've got an illegal vehicle parked in a truck zone, or you've got a truck parked in, you know, an area you don't want, or you have an abandoned vehicle on the right-hand side. You'll see that vehicle was abandoned. A person was supposed to be with that vehicle, otherwise they get ticketed. This happened to be an airport, but it could be almost anywhere. Taking information from drones. How do you get that information from drones, and how do you use that information? What are you collecting? How are you collecting it? What wireless connectivity, and what is the benefit? What's the outcome? The outcome in this case might be size of vehicles going down a particular road to make sure that nobody's, with a high tonnage vehicles going down a road that can't handle it. And on the right-hand side, illegal dumping. A lot of cities have problems with illegal dumping, and in some of them it costs them over $1 million a year just to clean up illegal dumping. If you're able to identify illegal dumping, and one of our partners was doing a demonstration in Arizona a couple weeks ago, and they were doing a traffic thing, and they happened to see an illegal dumping. And so the technician that was setting it up decided to record it, take it, send it to the city. City look at it and go, oh my gosh, wow. Got the license plate number of the vehicle, sent them a ticket, and then the next day they bought 2 mobile trailers that had the AI and everything built into it so they could move them around the city to help eliminate illegal dumping. So, I mean, the data's there. Homeless camps, do we have any of those in our areas today? Yeah, they come up in different ways. You need how can you control them? How can you identify those areas that don't need it? How do you identify a fire that might be occurring or fire spreading? How do you map people, location, events? How do you use GIS mapping with AI? Privacy becomes an important part a lot of times. People say, no, I don't want my car, I don't want my license plate, I don't want it collected. Well, we've got to look at risk versus it. Or maybe we need to use a different technology. Maybe rather than computer vision, we use LiDAR. LiDAR is the same picture on the left as computer vision, on the right is LiDAR. Gives us a lot of similar information, but it's more anonymized, if that's what you want to do. So there are technologies out there to do that. Here's another example, DFW toll plaza with LiDAR. Looking at vehicles. How long was a vehicle in that lane? How many were backed up? When do we open up more lanes? It all uses LiDAR, doesn't use a video sensor, uses a radio sensor. Third polling question. Pull up your phones there. All right, which outcomes are most important to you? Connectivity, safety, sustainability, cybersecurity, or not sure? And these are just 5 choices. I mean, there are hundreds of use cases and possibilities, but today we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about connectivity. We're talking about collaboration. So security is an important part of that, and collaboration. So everything is important. Where are you in that? Safety, yes. In most smart communities, smart spaces, safety is a lot of times the driving factor of that intelligent analytic solution. Why? Well, we already have cameras. The camera itself is a safety device. It's ones and zeros. So how do we collect that data to make safety? Whether it's speed control, whether it's pedestrian crossing, whether it's vandalism, whether it's theft, whatever it may be, that video sensor is there and can be shared relatively easy through community programs. Okay, I think we're about, so see roughly they're all important. Just what is important to you? What is your outcome? So we'll close that one out. Got a couple more slides before I run out of time. But collaboration is one thing. And how do we collaborate with that data? how do we share that data, but also how do we share that data without breaking the network, especially if you're talking about video information. I mean, transmitting video over some networks or 4G or 3G or 5G can be problematic. So how do we do that? How do we create a federated learning application that will allow you to maybe train certain data at the edge, certain data at a centralized location, or federated allows us to do the training at the edge and only send back results to the central location, thereby not overpowering the network, not creating challenges with the data being exposed to the network. Only the metadata would be brought back. And then we analyze that. We make it available through maybe a data marketplace so that other cities have access to that data so that they can add it to their data. And now we can have a community-wide statistical analysis, a chart, have all of that up there. So it's important. But to get there, sometimes within data itself, there's a journey. But the first part, the journey is, what is the business need and what is your outcome? How you get there can be very complex, or it can be very simple, okay? But there are processes to get you from point A to point B and to make sure that it matches your outcome. So everything starts with that outcome and everything ends with that outcome, because you've got to measure the results. Were you successful with what you said was the outcome, or did it change midstream and you have a new outcome that was driven from the previous outcome? So before you start any major project, before you even get in deciding what company or what technology or what compute infrastructure, what server, what storage, what network, whatever, you've got to decide what is the outcome. What is that you desire to get done? If you don't know that, you're going to spin your wheels, and it'll be another 10 years before smart communities actually get smart. So here's the last thing. City of Amarillo, utilizing the digital human. Give you an example.
I had my AI assistant actually generate a short summary of what digital human is. So I'm going to kick it off to Amy and let her do her intro and then pass it back to me for questions.
Hello, Mayor, Council, and residents of Amarillo. I am Amy, the AI assistant to the CIO of the City of Amarillo. Together, we work to seek out new technologies being used in business that can have an impact on the effectiveness of local government. Our goal is to safely implement these technologies to increase the efficiency of our city while greatly improving our service to the citizens. Navigating local government is often challenging for residents when they need access to information or services, particularly if that resident is not comfortable with technology or is new to our country and is still learning English. How much easier would it be if they could simply ask a question and get an answer? Digital humans enable new opportunities to greatly simplify the process for our residents. Let's start with a simple example of a resident needing to dispose of bulky trash.
Hello. Hola. Konnichiwa. I'm Sophie. It is great to meet you. What's your name?
Hi, Sophie. My name is Rich. I'm trying to find out if the city of Amarillo has a landfill.
Hello, Rich. Nice to meet you. Yes, the city of Amarillo does have a landfill. It is called the Amarillo Landfill, and it provides waste disposal services for residents and businesses in the area.
Is there anything they won't take?
While the Amarillo landfill accepts a wide range of waste materials, there are certain items that may not be accepted for disposal. These can include hazardous materials such as chemicals, paints, batteries, and medical waste. It's always best to check with the landfill directly or visit their website for a comprehensive list of acceptable and prohibited items.
Can you repeat that in Spanish?
Of course. Here's the translation in Spanish. Aunque el relleno sanitario de Amarillo acepta una amplia gama de desechos, hay ciertos elementos que es posible que no sean aceptados para su disposición. Estos pueden incluir materiales peligrosos como productos químicos, pinturas, baterías y residuos médicos. Siempre es mejor consultar directamente con el relleno sanitario o visitar su sitio web para obtener una lista completa de los elementos.
That was a Clara derivative developed by Dell there in the city of Amarillo. So this afternoon at 3:30 to 4, we're going to do some more demos of Clara. You'll be able to ask some questions. Maybe you want to know, what laptop is good for my student. What's a good machine for my work from home? What's, AI? What's, what do you want to ask? So we'll have some a little bit of input from you this afternoon from 3:30 to 4. So today we talked about AI in its sense that it's important to have the information. Gen AI is important, but you've got to have the right information for her to answer the questions and to provide you better insights. So this summit is to collaborate amongst yourselves to determine how data can be shared. What are you doing? What can be done together? If we do it together, can I share your data? What is the process of getting all that done? This collaboration, and that's what John has done with this summit, to be able to have it a continual process. This is not just a conference, but a summit. As John says, it doesn't end here, okay? It's got to continue if we're going to become smart. So thank you for the opportunity to present this information from my perspective. Very, limited in my knowledge. Things are changing. Used to be every year. Used to be 8 years, but now every year. Now every month, now every day, it seems like something's changing. So don't be afraid of it. Be ready for it. Understand the processes that you need to implement, what your governance policies are going to be, and what everything is needed for you to reach the outcome that you desire. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. It's time for break. Breakout room A is track A. We stuck with that, right? That is the place to go for a 10:15 start if you're interested in kind of the strategy and tactics around data projects, around data governance, kind of like how do we do some of this stuff. Track B in room B is focused in the first session on digital equity, workforce training, those aspects. So take a break, visit some of the vendors, and 10:15 in those rooms. We'll go 10:15 to 11 before the next break. Thank you very much.
you do to me. When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me know everything's alright. I'm hooked on a feeling, I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. Lips as sweet as candy, its taste is on my mind. Girl, you got me thirsty for another cup of wine. Got a bug from you, girl, but I don't need no cure. I just stay your victim if I can for sure. All the good love when we're all alone. Keep it up, girl. Yeah, you turn me on. I'm hooked on a feeling, I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. All the good love when we're all alone. Keep it up, girl. Yeah, you turn me on. I'm hooked on a feeling, I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. I'm hooked on a feeling, and I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. I said I'm hooked on a feeling, and I'm high on believing that you're in love with me.
Looking out a dirty old window, down below the cars in the city go rushing by. I sit here alone and I wonder why. Friday night and everyone's moving. I can feel the heat, but it's soothing, heading down. I search for the beat in this steady downtown. The onwards are going. Downtown, the onwards are growing. We're the kids in America. We're the kids in America. Everybody live for the music go round. Bright lights and music gets faster. Look, boy, don't check on your watch, not another glance. I'm not leaving now, honey, not a chance. Hot shot, give me no problems. Much later, baby, you'll be saying never mind. You know life is cruel, life is never kind. Hearts will make a new story. Kind hearts will gravity glory. We're the kids in America. We're the kids in America. Everybody lives for the music go round. Come closer, honey, that's better. Got to get a brand new experience, feeling right. Oh, don't try to stop, baby, hold me tight. Outside a new day is born. Outside suburbia is sprawling everywhere. I don't want to go, baby. New York to East California. There's a new wave coming.
All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I am Mark Wittenberg. I'm the Chief Information Officer here at the City of Raleigh. I want to welcome you here today. We have a wonderful panel prepared for you, all about data and data sharing. One of the things I wanted to mention is that there are QR codes for the conference, and if you go to that QR code, there are surveys throughout the day so that you can participate in the panels. You can also participate in this afternoon's reverse pitch. But it is my pleasure to I'm going to introduce the moderator, who is Jim Alberque. He's like our data guru. There's no title needed, but Jim is really instrumental in pushing our innovation, our GIS, our data analytics forward for the city of Raleigh. Been with the city for about 10 years, is that correct, Jim? And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Again, my name is Jim Alberque. I'm lucky enough to work on the City of Raleigh team, work with some really great folks, and that was a great keynote this morning, and I think a lot of those things will end up pulling on through this panel. So I wanted to kind of let my esteemed panelists kind of introduce themselves, so I'm going to turn it over to Laura first.
Good morning. My name is Laura Rogers. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Practice in the Secure Computing Institute of the Computer Science Department at NC State University. My job is working with industry, making sure that I am understanding what industry needs are in terms of cyber and translating that into curriculum, outreach events, everything like that. A perfect example is I went to a conference 6 months ago or so, and I found out that 45% of the job openings in cybersecurity include a GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance component. So I came back and said, hey, we got to start teaching this, which is what I do. And so, of course, I am now teaching that. But that's how we keep up with the latest and greatest in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Laura. Next, Robert.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. Robert Maxwell, TGT Solutions. I lead TGT, and our focus is on using technology to help economic development activity, fundamentally. We're using technology to help cities become smarter. We're using technology to empower citizens. We're using technology to help build communities. Anytime there is a community, an economic group, a city that wants to do better, we like to have the conversation because we've got lots of experience in the area.
Awesome, thank you. So again, as Mark mentioned, we're talking a lot about data sharing, picking up on a lot of what was discussed during the keynote about creating a smart region and some of the things that we need to think about as we're creating those things here and in other places. I have about a handful of questions, but we're going to open it up for questions at the end. So please, as we're talking, please think of those things. I think one of the things that we had talked about this morning was this is supposed to be a collaborative and learning kind of conference, so we're encouraging you to kind of participate. So I'm going to start first with you, Robert. So our topic today centers around improving data sharing projects in the region. Can you discuss the importance of trust and how to build that trust?
Trust is absolutely essential. And the very first way I think we go about building it is to have a vision of what we're hoping to accomplish and to share that vision. You have to share the vision and you have to share the value in an effort to build the trust. When you go to a community and you say, we want to help you, you have to be able to say, here's our vision of how we can do so. You have to ask for input and you have to be able to show value that has already been achieved. Has cable already been laid? Have you done something for someone in that community before? Are you finding a way to build on what was already established? So building the trust, we believe, starts with sharing the vision and showing the value.
Awesome, thank you. So Laura, you're next, kind of picking up on the thread of trust and cybersecurity. So trust always comes up with the topic of cybersecurity. What are the most important cybersecurity elements to consider when you're talking about data sharing?
I think if I could just piggyback on what my colleague here said about trust, I think we have a unique opportunity here to either build trust in our community or potentially destroy it. You know, most people nowadays are not terribly trustful of other people, of companies, of government, and we are really at a point where society is going to start crumbling if we're not trusting. And so he's right, we've got to data share, but we've got to make sure that everyone understands that their privacy is absolutely paramount. And so what I typically preach when I'm talking about this kind of thing is that privacy and cybersecurity, those are not departments, they're not people, they're values. And we have to make sure that everyone in the community understands and truly believes that we mean that when we start on these smart cities projects. Because if we do not protect their data, if we not afford them the privacy that we have promised that we would give them, then we will destroy the trust that they have in this organization and consequently in Raleigh and any other city that we're working in. So what I believe is that privacy and cyber have to be intertwined in every single decision that we make, every product that we purchase, everything that we do. We have to evaluate it against security and privacy, because trust is part of the fabric of our society, and we simply cannot afford to lose that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
To piggyback on what Laura said, and I agree with everything Laura has said, part of the initial comment I made about sharing the vision, one has to have conversation. Communication is so key in respect of trust. It's very important when you go to a community to ask what they're thinking, to ask what they want to share. You can't just present, well, in many cases, most places don't even present what they're trying to do. They just do it, which is a huge error because there's a huge backlash after that. So it's about having a conversation, sharing some information, sharing a vision, asking for feedback, getting buy-in. So many times there are groups that do not know what a city is trying to do. The city comes along and the city does something. People go, what did they just do? Why did they do it? One has to share first. One has to receive their feedback. It's so important. We've seen this so many times where you get 4 or 5 key groups in the community. In social media, they call them influencers. But in a community context, I think of organizations. People who will use or consume the technology in question. You get them involved in the conversation. You get them to help to share the message. You get feedback from them, and that helps toward building the trust.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the customer this morning, the resident. And so Laura, I'd love to get your feedback on talking about your building that trust, communicating. What are some mechanisms that you think are good ways to talk about security and privacy with our constituency and residency, making sure that they know, that what we're doing and why we're doing it?
I think you have to, exactly what he was saying is, you've got to get their input. It's all about the voice of the customer. They have to feel some ownership in this process, and you need to let them know what the process is, because they've got to buy into the process. How are we going to vet products and services so that they understand? They may not understand and probably won't understand the technology, but they will understand a process. So you've got to convince them of that, and it's going to take a lot of communication and a lot of listening and conveying that you do care about what they think and about their privacy. As I was watching the Clara thing, I was trying to imagine if I had absolutely zero background in technology, maybe I was new to the country, gosh, how would I feel about that, And I think if you just hit people with something like that, you're going to get backlash. I think we have to understand something that a lot of people don't understand, is that the majority of the populace has zero IT acumen. And, you know, I found that out recently just putting something about a password, about how to do passwords in a newsletter for an organization I belong to. And I couldn't believe the comments I got back. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to use the same password for every single account. Really, where have you been? But most of these people they don't understand this stuff. And so the technology is frightening. They don't trust it in general. They've seen all the movies, they've seen the TV shows about how this data has been used against typically marginalized folks in the society. So I think it's going to take a lot of communication. I think, you know, everybody's going to want to go quickly because this is cool stuff. This is great technology. It's going to be fun to play with. But I think we're going to have to really go very slowly and make sure that we're getting buy-in, you know, as we go.
If I can piggyback on Laura's remark about going slowly, it's important to realize that you have to take whatever time it takes to build trust. You can't say we're going to be doing this for 2 weeks and then after the 2 weeks, off we go. We worked with a community in Pennsylvania earlier this year, and they wanted to do this wonderful project of making sure that they made communication ICT technology available across their entire community. And we said, just a second, have we spoken to the Hispanic community? And we brought the largest Hispanic group of that community into the conversation. You know what the first thing they said was? Nobody's ever spoken to us before. And none of our people use what you are proposing. Everybody just shut up. Because immediately the city's plan sounded good, but nobody in the Hispanic community, which is a growing segment of their community, was interested in what they were doing. It takes time to build trust. You have to communicate. The other comment I'd make to just support something Laura just said was, when you approach the conversation and you do begin to build the trust, you're chatting with them back and forth, be very mindful about privacy concerns. There are a lot of people who are not comfortable giving you data, and when they give it to you, they don't want you using it. So you have to be very mindful of privacy as you work toward building trust. Yes, there are various technological ways to assure people about the fact that their data will be safe with you, but take the time to show them why this is going to work. How are you going to make sure my data doesn't get out there?
And if I could just piggyback off of Robert, I think one of the concerns is, you know, we're all kind of used to, we're seeing cameras everywhere and, you know, we're kind of getting used to that. But I think the biggest concern now is AI. And none of us truly knows what's going to happen as a result of using AI. And I think that is going to be a big deal when it comes to gaining trust, is how can you prove to me that you're not going to use this data against me or in a way that I don't approve of once AI really takes hold? And I think we're going to have to really flesh that one out because I don't know that we have an answer for all of that. And so that's another sort of complicating factor when you're looking at trust and privacy and security.
So do you mind if I add? I wanted to add like a city perspective or a public sector perspective, and it's much more for like guidance and advice. So we talked a lot about privacy and security and being very kind of thoughtful and intentional about that. 2, we heard a lot about storytelling and communication and being very intentional about that. In our organization, we are trying to provide the best services we can to our constituents. And the services that they're currently interacting with on the private sector side are frictionless and easy and have AI integration and all of those things. And then they go to maybe consume a city service and maybe it's not so easy. So I think in the public sector, we're feeling some pressure to move quickly, right? And we're traditionally under-resourced, so it's challenging to do that implementation of policy, communicate, consider cybersecurity, all at the same time. It's a plate spinning activity. Love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's a different level of consideration in terms of how your data is used, if it's used by a corporation versus used by the government. Corporations have limited power. And so, and also by law, if they're using your information in a way that you didn't approve of, and, we all see these 9-page privacy docs and we're just like, forget it, I'm going to click yes. But if they were to violate something in there, there's always kind of some legal recourse. But you just don't have the expectation from a corporation that they truly are always going to have your best interests at heart. The thought is that the government should. And so I think that's the differentiator there. And yeah, everybody wants the coolest new thing when it comes to accessing data, information, whatever. But I think we still need to be very careful from the government perspective, because it's just very different to give your information to a corporation than it is to give to a government that could possibly, you're afraid they might use that information against you somehow.
Awesome.
If I may add to what Laura is saying, trust is an extraordinarily valuable commodity. There is a crisis of confidence all around the place in terms of data and what people will do with the data. We all read about hacks all the time. It's much better to go slowly and to do it right and to build confidence and to build trust in your community than it is to be first or be fast and appear to be competitive and not have built the right framework. Many times it's okay for the city to say, we are doing this right. Many times it's okay for the city to say, I think you want us to ensure the security of your data. I think the community gives the city more permission to take a bit more time to do it right. And I think cities should avail themselves of that permission that the citizens will give them. The other comment is, I think, again, it comes back to that sharing the vision. You share the vision of what you're trying to do. Share the vision of the foundational data you want to put in place, the foundational security you're putting in place, the foundational privacy protections you're putting in place. People trust you more. And that's key to the building block for the future.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of pull on the collaboration and regional collaboration thread. So I'm going to start with you, Laura. How can regions and collaborations leverage effective regional partnerships to enhance overall resiliency of smart cities while also offering a robust cybersecurity kind of posture?
Wow, that's quite a question. I'm not really sure I can answer that fully. Obviously, we need data sharing. We see that with, sharing of threat information amongst the different agencies in the federal government. And the reason we do that is so that, if the Department of Defense, is there some, threat actor there, that may go over into the Department of Homeland Security. And we know that that's a problem if when we have those silos. That's one of the reasons we had 9/11, right? We weren't sharing data. So I think that data sharing is very important for safety, for convenience, for efficiency, things like that. What's working over here, might work over here. But again, the first thought, even though efficiency and effectiveness and all of that is super important, we're still going to have to circle back and remember, are we able to secure this data? Because it's going to be data in transit. If it's going from this community to that community, how are we protecting it? And one of the things that I really want to hammer home here, and I talk to my students about this, is we have got to push and push all of these vendors that we're going to buy things from to embed security into their products. I am old enough to remember when we didn't embed quality into our products. We actually thought we could inspect it in. And we can't seem to learn from our mistakes. We did the same thing with safety. That's someone else's problem. I'm an engineer. I'm going to do my engineering. You can worry about safety. You can worry about quality. And you can worry about security. And you can worry about privacy. That doesn't work. In a corporation, though, it's first to market. And that's what, if you've been listening to Jen Easterly harp on this, I'm like, yes, finally, someone is saying we have got to engineer security and privacy into these products. And we have an opportunity with this initiative to push that, because market forces haven't done it. We're not a savvy enough populace to be able to require that of the products and services that we buy. For example, you buy an Alexa for grandma and grandpa, thinking that's going to help them. Well, they don't know that there's a default password. They don't know what a default password is, much less that they've got to change it. So tech companies, and I apologize if I'm offending anyone, have pushed security, privacy, everything else down to those of us who don't know how to do it. So this is a huge opportunity, for Raleigh and the whole state is to insist that the products that we get to go forward with this initiative have privacy and security embedded in them. Another thing that I would recommend is the use of digital twins. I think that if we could have a digital twin for the Raleigh smart cities and digital twins for all the others, then we can actually, when we're testing, we can see what happens before something catastrophic happens in the real world. It'll happen on a digital twin. So that would be the other thing I would suggest.
Mark, I didn't pay her to say that.
I was going to ask.
Jim asked about collaboration. One of the things we're very keen on is collaborative frameworks. Those who are collaborating should have some sort of framework whereby there's an understanding of what it is we're collaborating about and what it is we're trying to get out of this collaboration. In the keynote, Jim Wells spoke about outcomes. It's very important to discuss outcomes. We are leading a project at the moment between a city and the universities in the city. It's a major collaboration to create a particular outcome. We spent probably a year before we quote unquote broke ground on the project, figuring out the collaboration framework. What is it you, universities, want out of it? What is it that we, the city, want out of it? How are we going to share the data? And these conversations not only built trust, but because there was a framework in terms of understanding what data would be shared, who could use it, and all of those security parameters were built in, we now expect to do the project in about 6 weeks' time. So collaboration, absolutely key. Create the framework up front, then you can have a highway on which you can speed.
Excellent. So this is going to be my last question before we open it up for audience questions. I think we kind of touched on a couple of different questions, but on the cybersecurity side, as well as collaboration, trust, et cetera, what are some advice that you have around foundational things that we can do locally, regionally, other cities and towns around creating these regional collaborative smart city partnerships?
I first of all suggest that you think about the trust component as a separate project. Most people will say, we've got a cable project, an ICT project of some sort, and it's 10 million or whatever, and everybody's focused on that project. Why don't we just have a small project at first, if you will, a precursor to the main project where we build the frameworks we just talked about, whether you call it a trust framework, a collaborative framework, call it whatever you want. But have a phase up front where you get some of those foundational things in place, well understood, in writing, where you go down to the data element level. Can we share phone numbers? Can we share license numbers? Can we share, in our case, the case I just mentioned, the IDs of the people who are making the inquiries? Can we share data about what inquiries are being made? I mentioned to you before there were different universities. Universities are very competitive. Everybody wants to know, well, how many inquiries did you get? So figure out up front what data you can share. And as I commented earlier, share the vision. You got to share the vision. You also have to show the value, because remember, this data is going to persist 20, 30, 40 years into the future. So you have to show the value in terms of what you're going to do and how you're going to protect it. It's important to have simple things like statements on your website which speak to these things. It may seem simple, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have a concept of how they're going to use that data 5 years later. Share it with people. People have the questions. Answer the questions. Give them the chance to pose the question. You give yourself the opportunity to answer the question and make sure you've built trust. Trust is not expensive to build in terms of money, but it does take time.
I really like that, starting small, Robert. I think that's really good. It also gives you an opportunity to continuously improve. I'm a big continuous improvement person, process person. That's just how I am. I was born that way, I think. And I'm always looking for ways to improve. And so I think, starting small, looking at the results, communicating the results, getting feedback from the community, and then improving, and then moving out and getting larger. I think that, we need to incorporate continuous improvement, obviously, in everything that we're doing. Particularly, as we know, technology changes so quickly, the threat landscape changes so quickly, we really don't have any choice but to stay on top of it, and that means continuous improvement and making sure that, we're communicating. We're not going to get all this in place and then stop. We have to make sure that we're always polling people. How is it going? What do you think? Do you like this? Do you not? And I think that's super important that we make sure that we're always listening. It's always the voice of the customer.
Jim, can I add? I'll give you another example just to try and make this more tangible for you. For the last 10 years, we have managed an economic collaboration between about 8 different cities that make up a particular county. 8 different cities in a county, and they wanted an economic collaboration. One of the founding collaborative principles was we're going to collect the data and we're going to share the anonymized data. So each city knew, for example, how many businesses was in their particular city, and they knew the detail, but other cities could see the anonymized version of it. You had 39 bakeries. You had 47 general mechanic shops. As a principle of sharing, everybody understood what could be shared and how it could be shared. So over a 10-year period, they've been able to aggregate incredible amounts of data, draw incredible conclusions, and figure out how they can collaborate with each other. If we, for example, using Laura's example, if this university provides a GRC course and the other university provides a more technical course in cybersecurity, we can actually help each other. So they were able to facilitate data interchange through collaboration, but it was anonymized, and anonymized to the point where they could infer valuable insights without compromising privacy, security, or anything like it.
And I think, Tom, you might have heard during the keynote, Tom mentioned a project that we did locally around stormwater, and we kind of went through this this exercise where it seems pretty straightforward, but once you kind of get down to brass tacks, there's a lot of logistics in getting kind of a set of 9, 10, 12, 15 organizations, unique organizations, working together, validating assumptions, making sure that everyone's comfortable with the security posture, the processes on how we're going to share data, et cetera. So we have 15 minutes. I have a whole set more questions, but I'd love to open it up for the audience for questions. Why don't we go John first?
I'd like to ask Robert, what are some of the... Oh, yeah. So, in those places where you've worked with multiple communities, what are the more the internal government challenges, right? I mean, it's one thing to know the data standards and anonymizing the data, but what are some of the challenges they overcame to learn to work together from an institutional standpoint?
So the question related to institutional challenges and how to overcome institutional challenges. The very first thing you have to do is focus on the outcome. In the case of the communities I talked about, the 8 communities understood that because they were right next to a major city, if they didn't do something, that city was going to literally suck all of their talent out, and having sucked the talent out, they would be bankrupt, quite literally. As you have seen on many occasions, it just takes one large employer to leave a region and for that region to be decimated. They knew, in the case of the 8 we were talking about, that I'm talking about, they knew that one of the motor companies was going to be leaving. The writing was on the wall. So they knew they had to build other industries. So the very first thing they did to overcome that potential drag that comes from the many internal discussions that can go on at the governmental level was to realize we have a common objective. We want this region to survive, and we're going to do it by getting economic data and figuring out new industries that we can develop. The other thing they did was to show the value, borrow on some standards that had already been put in place, and they were able to build on those standards. We got them to trust the fact that each municipality could collect its own data and keep it private, but just share the anonymized results. That was a very simple step, but again, it built trust. And having built trust, you can then break down some of the barriers that happen with those internal governmental disputes. The other thing that was very useful was because it was a public-private partnership where the government had to work with private firms, it was easier to get around some of those things that might have been localized. You could externalize it by reminding people, look, this is how we've done it elsewhere. And once people saw models that worked, they bought in a whole lot more easily.
I think I'm next. Depending on how you define it, we're dealing with like 4 or 5 different generations in the workforce right now. So, Laura, I'm curious from your perspective, how is your student body thinking, they grew up with smartphones in their hands, some of them at this point. How are they approaching and thinking about privacy and security? And then Robert, from your perspective, when you were going into these different cities and communities and counties, have you dealt with challenges in that regard as far as dealing with different generations?
So at NC State, we have the Secure Computing Institute. We have a cybersecurity concentration. And so we're trying to teach the students, to consider security when they're writing code, for example. In the course that I teach, I'm really hammering embedded security, right? But my fear is that these 30 students that I have are going to go out into industry, and the first thing they're going to say is, wait a minute, this isn't secure, and they're not going to have a job. So we have got to decide, collectively, that we want our country to survive. And the only way it's going to do that is if we protect national security. And the only way it's going to do that is if we start really embedding security into our products and services. This isn't going to be market-driven like quality was. You're probably too young, but I can remember the day, when you pick something up and it was like made in Japan and you put it back down. A few years later, they were making the best automobiles on the planet because they listened to W. Edwards Deming. We didn't, right? And so then, all of a sudden, everybody's buying Hondas. I was one of them. And so market drove quality, right? And so all of a sudden Ford and GM and all these, they had to embed quality into the product. And so we don't really have those kind of market forces because no one knows how to make somebody embed security or privacy in. So how we can pull us all together to do that is national security. We are not going to have a country. I'm a former defense contractor. I know what our adversaries are capable of. We are not going to have a country if we don't get all in the same boat and paddle in the same direction toward security. And one thing that we need to do is we've got to start young. And we've got to get in schools when the kids are young and start teaching them these things. Our adversaries do that. You know, we're just now requiring a computer class to graduate. I mean, really, what year is this? How is that possible? So as parents, if you have children, get in your schools and push it and say, you have got to do better. Our adversaries are doing better, but we are not. And so, you know, I would hope that, you know, all the universities and community colleges are teaching secure by design principles and that we're all pushing that. But at the end of the day, once these kiddos get out into industry, if that's not what industry wants, that's not what they're going to be doing.
One of your questions was about crossing the divide in terms of the age and the interest of the various participants. One of the things we're doing in a project out in Oregon at the moment, older people like face-to-face communication. So we bring them into the local fire hall and have conversations to build that trust and to gain their support. With the younger people in that community, we're using digital channels, Instagram in particular. So having communicated with them in those particular areas, built trust, we then are able to foster that collaboration across the multiple age groups and interest levels in the amount of data. Older people tend to be interested in well, what are you going to do? They're interested very much in the outcome. Younger people are very much more interested in the process. Well, how are we going to do this? So addressing each group's questions has helped us to bridge that gap.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence and data governance, and there are a number of guidance, regulations, laws in various states that are being formulated. I know OMB just came out with one earlier this week. So as a group that's implementing those kinds of capabilities, you know, how do you think about how to enforce those kinds of regulations, how to provide that governance around data quality, around privacy, around security in the context of artificial intelligence?
Good luck. I'm not sure I want to answer that because I don't really, I don't really know, like, you know, the answer to that question. I've had a lot of people, former clients of mine say, okay, you know, the executive order on AI just came out. So how is this going to affect compliance, especially the defense contractors I worked with? I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I think it's going to make it more complex, and it is going to require, again, that we be a lot more savvy than we are right now. And that's why I would like to get in, starting with kindergartners on this stuff, because I didn't grow up with a cell phone in my hand. You know, I asked John, I said, where's the written agenda? You know, because I'm older, and that's what I'm used to, and I don't want to look on my phone. But the thing is, you know, we're all going to have to up our game, I think, and that's a tough sell, and it's especially for older folks to really, you know, understand all of this. And so the bottom line is, after all that rambling, is I'm really not sure how to answer your question. I think right now the federal government and all governments are scrambling to try to stay ahead of all of this. And unfortunately, as a country, we kicked the cybersecurity can down the road for so long that now we're sort of in knee-jerk mode. And, we're just cranking out, the 2 new FAR clauses just hit, for review. NIST 800-53, the latest rev just came out, well, a few minutes ago. And so, it's just panic mode. And most of us just can't. I do that kind of stuff for a living. I can't wrap my brain around it. So unfortunately, it's going to require a lot of just due diligence. And we're going to have to bring in experts. I mean, somebody who really, truly gets this stuff. And get them to understand how important it is that we use this new technology, and maybe it can help us with regulation. But again, I always go back to, if we have not convinced everyone that we're not going to use this data improperly, and even if it's anonymized, who's to say that 10 years from now somebody doesn't what is it, de-anonymize it? I mean, and how do we know that AI won't de-anonymize it, right? I mean, we're in a real pickle here, and it's going to take a lot of diversity of thought and a lot of careful consideration before we just move forward quickly with something like that. As Robert was saying, we got the planning stage has to be long and slow.
To answer another aspect of your question, one of the projects, which I haven't yet mentioned, on which we're working, that city has adopted what they called a mixed modality mode. So while it is possible to do many things in the project through AI, they're only going to use AI in one area of the project with chatbots. Comment number one. Comment number two, they're training the chatbot based on the feedback that they're receiving from the community. So they're using AI, but they're using it in a very limited and contained way so that they can say they're using AI, but then they're helping people to become accustomed to it. Remember I mentioned earlier that whole bringing older people into the fire hall because they want to have face-to-face conversations. They're also educating those older people in terms of why you should be comfortable asking this chatbot, remember, it's just a part of the project, asking this chatbot those types of questions, and they've built it so that, well, we're going to build it in such a way that you can easily get out of the chatbot and chat to a real person. So it's being done that way so that we can help the younger people, because that's the only way they'll consume it, on their phones and with some AI built in, and to help the older people to come along as well. So it is possible to bridge the gap with respect to the introduction of AI projects, but you got to plan it very carefully and build the trust.
And something I just wanted to pick up on is education, right? That is something that we can all do. We are all responsible for cybersecurity. So as we know more, we share more. I think that's to put a little bow on it. Collaboration, sharing information, education, I think is a real value to all of us, especially as it relates to new shiny technology that is kind of proliferating the world. So we're out of time. Join me, please. Laura, Robert, really appreciate great insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to the esteemed panel. I learned quite a bit, and communication is key, right? So thank you. Don't forget, on your agenda is the QR code. Please fill out the survey there. Got 15-minute break, and then, again, A and B track. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Morning, everybody. How are we doing? Fun so far? Woo! I heard a woo over here in the panel. All right, it's going to be a fun one. I'm Mark Wittenberg. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Raleigh. I wanted to welcome you all. In your agenda, you'll see a QR code. I would encourage you to scan that QR code, and then you can participate in the summit by providing feedback, and then also for the reverse pitch this afternoon, you'll be able to vote on those. But I'd like to introduce Steve Rao. He is going to be your moderator for this session, which is talking about what we were talking about in the keynote, which is how do we build a connected community? How do we build that? And then more importantly, how do we sustain it? But Steve is from the city of Morrisville and is a council member and is, I know, very passionate about technology and how technology can be leveraged to add value in the community. So with that, Steve?
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here today. I did want to say I'm very proud of the town of Morrisville. Our CIO, Rick Ralph, is here, and Billy Whitehead, and of course, Brandon Zuidema is on the panel. And we're just so excited about Morrisville doing really a lot of great things in smart cities. And Brandon's going to talk a little bit about that. Before we begin to introduce this wonderful panel, what I'll say is that it's such an exciting time to be in IoT. Just a few weeks ago, I had a 30-minute virtual coffee with John Chambers, who used to run Cisco. I knew his mom and dad. He's from West Virginia. And John told me that he's just so excited about AI. I know we talked about the opening keynote, and IoT. Out of the 16 companies that he's invested in, 3 are AI companies, and they're all billion-dollar companies today. So I think it's just really exciting what we can do to grow that kind of innovation ecosystem here in the Triangle. And I've learned about smart cities that it's really about leveraging the quality of services to our residents and keeping your residents engaged. And that's what I've really learned from this whole experience. So with that being said, I'm honored today to introduce a wonderful panel. First, we have Brandon Zuidema. Brandon is the new town manager in Morrisville. He has been serving our community since 2019 as he was our deputy manager, and he has 30 years of experience in local government. He's also spent 10 years in the town of Garner as their chief of police, and he's worked in New York and Virginia. We want to welcome you, Brandon. Thank you for being on the panel. And he makes the council members look very good. Second, we have David Ihrie, the Chief Technology Officer of the Virginia Innovation Partnership. As the CTO for the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, Dave has designed and launched several VIPC strategic initiatives, including the Virginia Smart Community Testbed. The VIPC creates technology-based economic development strategies to accelerate innovation, imagination, and the next generation of technology and tech companies and entrepreneurs. And today he is responsible for deploying smart technology across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So really focusing on cross-jurisdictional data sharing. So thank you so much for being here, David. And we have David I, who is the Director of Customer Solutions and Strategic Partner Alliances. David is responsible for building teams to identify solutions for private and public clients with Allied Digital and leads their system integration for smart cities, smart buildings, and IoT across the United States. Allied Digital provides a wide range of infrastructure solutions to communities around the globe, and David brings a global perspective as well, as he's done a lot of this stuff around the world. So please join me in welcoming David I. So I have a lot of questions here. I'm going to do my best to get through them. Might combine a few and want to definitely take a few minutes of getting questions from the audience. So I'm still first going to start with Brandon Zuidema. Brandon, Morrisville has gone from literally nowhere just a few years ago to now being a nationally recognized leader in smart cities, getting an award last year in Denver from the Smart Cities Council, getting an award from Governor Cooper and Secretary Jim Weaver at the Digital Summit. Could you talk a little bit about the town of Morrisville smart city programs? How did you get to where you are today? What are some of the benefits you're seeing for residents? And what do you see in the future?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we've gotten to where we are because we have some really, really smart and creative and innovative staff. Two of them that are leading our program in the audience, Rick Ralph, our CIO, Billy Whitehead, our Smart Cities Program Manager. They have accelerated this so quickly and in my non-technological background way, really, really amazingly to get us to where we are. And again, we also have the support of our council. Councilmember Rao is a longtime proponent of the use of technology in smart cities, so he is a driving force. We have other council members that are also interested in this process, and not necessarily smart cities, but for us, it's about community engagement. And I think that's what's been a real benefit to us is, we are always looking to engage with our community any different way we can. So our community is, we are next to RTP, for those of you that may not recognize that. So we have a lot of folks in our community that work in tech jobs, so they're very interested. Our most recent advisory committee is our Smart City Steering Committee that was started about 2 years ago, give or take. So that brings additional resources to the table to support us, but we're making use of that to, again, really try to better engage our community. So we're doing that primarily through our Smart City dashboard. A ton of data and information is available to the community that wants to go and look for it there. We're also using it specifically in a couple of areas. One is certainly our parks. So we are using sensors to track activity, to track data. If, for example, if you want to go to Church Street Park and play tennis, you can go to the dashboard and see if it's busy and see when it might be expected to free up. And again, as a non-technological guy, I'm like, wow, that's actually pretty cool, because I would have just driven to the park and hoped for the best. And then we're doing the same thing. One of our other parks, we have installed moisture sensors, a park that we typically have a lot of issues with because it's in and near a floodway. So now that can automatically activate signs at the park to open and close based on the conditions of the field. I mean, just a couple of examples of where I think we're going and the benefits that we see in keeping our community informed.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll come back to you on that. We're going to go with David now, and if you could explain a little bit about the VIPC, the organization, but then really, we have, for all of you, I'm going to start with you on this general question, and during the panel, I'd like to get your input. But we have in Wake County 13 local governments, but we don't have a lot of cities other than Raleigh and Cary and now Morrisville. So how do you, one thing we want to know is about your advice for the Triangle region on how we share best practices better. How do we foster more regional collaboration?
Yeah, thank you. So first about the organization. So VIPC is actually an extension of the executive branch in Virginia. We're created by a special authority for the legislature, but operate as a not-for-profit. And so I have statewide purview. Our goal is to help communities across the state, and I will say that the most important thing is sort of committed leadership. So, the kinds of things that you're doing, I think, are exemplary. One of the things that we are doing increasingly is we run a number of pilot projects with IoT, with cybersecurity, with various technologies, and because we're sort of a centralized function, we can act as a repository of expertise and use that to help leverage the expertise now that's being built in individual communities. So I think we have certainly some places in Virginia. Fairfax County is very technically advanced and do a lot with technology, but they're not doing everything across the board. There are other communities that don't have an IT manager because they're so small. And so how can we help bring those communities into the productive use of technology for economic development? And so there, we can either support with our expertise, having played with a number of these technologies, or we can connect those communities to other communities around the state that have that kind of expertise.
Fantastic. We'll come back to you and ask you some follow-ups on that. And for David you're a massive systems integrator, so you've got the excitement of providing your infrastructure. So what is your perspective as a systems integrator in terms of how you can get cities, counties, and private industry to bring the needed technology and infrastructure to our residents?
Great question. So I think, one of the best things that, the best paths to be able to answer that is, you saw this morning with Jim next door, he talked about the Dell technologies, talked about looking at the outcomes. So you start with the people. What is the business outcomes in the very end? So once we understand that, then we can start beginning an approach around aligning to overcoming those barriers that get in the way. And I think one of the biggest things we see is the need for open communication and able to break down those barriers, if you will. We become a bit of a mediator to where we understand the larger community of technologies, the strategic partnerships and alliances that have to be into place. We either have them already or we will build them creatively for each individual city needs. And this also helps expedite that idea around digital transformation, looking at cyber end-to-end, bringing the ability of cross-jurisdictional communication together that drives risk down. And another key point is, I've heard a lot about, the city's desires to want to get to the next level and try to decrease that cycle time and how to do that. So one of the things we do at Allied is we bring to market a faster, easier way to process a proof of concept. And in that proof of concept, that's done early on with little to no budget to execute a microcosm of what would really happen for the fully executed solution.
Fantastic. I'm going to go to Mr. Ihrie as a follow-up to that and go back to Brandon. But, we've had a lot of success in Morrisville with entrepreneurial companies piloting with us. Today, we have a company named Sam IT Analytics that's here at Veridex, and they work with us to create the Smart City Dashboard, right? So there's, Tom Snyder, I want to commend his leadership at Riot, all the things he's doing with Riot, the incubator, demo day, that startup showcase today. How does this tie into economic development? Can you cite specific examples that, what can we take from this panel and go to Governor Cooper or go to Secretary Sanders or even Chris Chung to see, why should they be getting behind smart cities?
Yeah, and kudos to Tom Snyder as well. We also work with Riot in Virginia. So, I think our sweet spot as an organization is actually with small early stage innovators. So we do investment programs. We coordinate across all the accelerators and incubators and so forth in Virginia. If you look at the data, most of the net new job creation that happens in the United States comes from companies that are less than 5 years old. And so that engine of job growth and of creativity is just critical to how we do economic development. I think the kind of the rubric of smart communities is really about how you understand data and how you use data for the benefit of the communities that we live in. And so it's critical kind of as we move to the future, how are we going to bring those capabilities into the workforce, into the community? How are we training people who are coming into the workforce, both with the skill sets, but also with the entrepreneurial mindset to help create those jobs?
So these successful companies can get capital and they start hiring jobs and then that's...
Exactly, right. And again, we're, I think, fortunate as an organization, so we have both the strategic initiatives, the ability to conduct pilot projects and to implement technology in various communities. We also have the investment side under a single roof. So my colleague next door does equity investments in early stage companies. The next person over actually runs a grants program. So, it's in that sense, we're a bit of a single stop shop for early stage companies, for entrepreneurs looking to grow their technologies or their products.
Fantastic. Going to go back to Brandon. Brandon, I'm going to put it in two small questions for you. First, you're new in your role, and Morrisville's got a lot of innovative projects going on. What do you got planned in the future? Any ideas there? And then as a follow-up, how you work a lot across the region with other managers. You're very well known. What advice do you have about how Morrisville and other local governments that are having success share it with other local governments in the region?
Thanks, Steve. So, in terms of where we're heading, obviously continued expansion of what we have started in the parks in terms of using that technology to better inform users and visitors and residents that may want to go to the parks. That's always powerful. Expanding the use of our dashboard, making that more available through advertising and outreach and making sure that the residents are aware that it exists, I think is really important. One of the things that I'm excited about is the concept of smart corridors. And so I realize this may be unique to Morrisville, but we've got some traffic issues. And then we also have some safety concerns on a lot of our roadways. So with smart corridors, one, it's going to help us with potentially expediting traffic flow and making better use of that through monitors and sensors. But then from a safety standpoint, it's also going to help us with recording, where are there not only accidents, but near misses that you might not otherwise know about, and that helps you be better informed as to how to address those types of concerns. We've started that very preliminarily, and this is actually a regional approach. This maybe ties into the other question. So we have a sort of a unified fire department among 3 communities in Cary, Apex, and Morrisville. And so they operate essentially as one fire department. So we dispatch the closest unit, we share resources, they respond together, they train together. And so we have implemented preemption to make sure that they're getting to where they need to get as quick as is practical, because seconds literally count in the fire service. And so that has been implemented on all of our fire apparatus, and not only in Morrisville, but also if we head into Cary, the same thing. Those lights are going to preempt because we're all in the same system. So that's, I think, a really excellent example of where we're headed. Your question about, I think, regionalism, that's one little example of what we're doing. We're also working with other municipalities. We've just made a joint grant application for another Smart Cities project that we hope will come through. So I think as one example. But really for communities that aren't necessarily doing smart cities now, my best advice is do something. Like, you don't have to start with this all-encompassing master plan that's going to take 10 years to implement and millions of dollars. Do something. Start out with something small, demonstrate how it works, get a little proof in the pudding, if you will, that allows better support from the community for additional funding. If you have council members that may not be convinced, great opportunity to show them, hey, look at what we've done, and it works, and it's helping your performance as a council member, it's helping our performance as staff to keep community involved. So a lot of opportunities out there.
Okay. I'm going to ask thank you so much, Brandon. I'm going to ask a few more questions and open up the audience, and we'll come back because there's just so many questions to ask. So I'm going to do a question for both David, Ihrie, and Dave I. What experiences do you have any experiences on the challenges you had of building a smart region, and any advice based on the experiences that what we can learn from and do a better job here?
Sure. I think some things that might be overlooked is, cities, counties, municipalities trying to take on more of it on their own, as opposed to relaxing the gates a little bit and connecting to more private industry to bring things together. For example, rural communities that are trying to get, improved infrastructure to support remote workers. So they're challenged with, funding they need to get in place to bring high-speed data out to homes and businesses in far out rural areas where the tax bases are lower. So, some resolutions around that, for example, are, combining efforts with telecom companies, infrastructure, power, utility companies. So utility is doing a piece of it. It's broken out in phases. You mentioned, not trying to take on the whole pie at once, just breaking it down into phases. So that's an example where utilities are working to deploy fiber. The telecom companies are working in the second stage to support it. And then on the very end, the ISP is setting up and establishing the cloud services and interconnectivity. So, these are 3 totally different companies working together with counties and cities, and municipalities and regional communities to take something that would have taken 10, 15 years and be able to do it in 1 to 3 years.
Fantastic. David, your insights on that?
Yes, I think a lot of what we're focusing on now is how you build those collaborations. And part of the reason I'm here is we'd like to do that across the state lines as well. So, if I look at flooding, for example, on the Roanoke River, that affects both Virginia and North Carolina. And so how can we effectively manage to share that data? Or we do a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security, and a big focus there on emergency management, on how you get, the emergency response community to work across jurisdictions. I think one of the things that I'm bullish about has been effective for us at the state level in getting agencies to share data, the traditionally stovepiped agencies. We've put together a thing called the Commonwealth Data Trust, and so it's actually a legal trust entity where the chief data officer is the trustee. What it enables from a data governance point of view is every time I want to do a new project, I don't need to do 20 data sharing agreements between each of the individual entities. It acts as a mechanism where each agency can do a single data sharing agreement with the data trust, and then on a project by project basis, authorize different uses of the data. But in all of those cases, the data owner, the originator of the data, maintains control over who can see their data, who can share it for what purposes. So I think that mechanism for controlled data management, data governance, and we've put forward the hypothesis that that will scale to a national level. So if I have an entity in Virginia, that's a member of a national version of that. And if there's a comparable entity in North Carolina that's also a member of that national version, now we have a direct mechanism on a very rapid basis to be able to share data. So if an emergency happens on the border, we already have the legal agreements in place. All we need to do is instantiate that project.
Okay, fantastic. One last question for Brandon, then we're going to open up the audience and then come back with a few more questions. How are we doing for time? We doing okay? 40? No, 20. 20 minutes. Okay, good. 40 minutes. I can keep going, filibuster, right? So for Brandon, one of the things, and I want to make this more of a work session, so please share ideas, and I think this is going to be a work in process, but I'd like to see, we have a mayor of Wake Forest here, Mayor Cawley may be coming from Morrisville, but we don't see a lot of cities here, so how can we get other cities and towns excited about smart cities? It's just sharing some of the best practice, some of the successes we've had.
No, I think that's exactly it. I think as we continue, we obviously come together occasionally as a group of managers, so I think taking that opportunity to share that information with the other managers, with other staff, to show them, that maybe it's not as complicated as thought, or maybe it's not as expensive as thought, or maybe there's an opportunity, particularly in a regional sense, to do things together. And so we see that already. We are already actively working with Carrie on a variety of projects, just traffic light maintenance and control. Again, I already mentioned the CAM model. So I think as you see that first success, you're then going to see the future successes be even easier. The first one works, everybody goes, wow, why do we wait so long to do that one? And then it just rolls into additional projects, and it gets creative. And again, there is some money out there for this. And so those collaborative grant applications are often looked at more favorably than a single jurisdiction. So I think bringing that to people's attention and sharing what's out there. But to some extent, it does take someone to step up and say, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to make this important. And we certainly have the opportunity to do that within Wake County.
Fantastic. We're going to open it up just for the audience for a few minutes. We got 20 more minutes. And just introduce yourself, say where you're from, and then ask a question, and then please, thank you.
So John Polly, security technology consultant out of Charleston, South Carolina. And Brandon, you kind of touched on it in a second, but cities are made up of siloed stakeholders, right? And so it takes that champion at the highest level to get those silos to break down and say, we're going to work together, right? One of those silos can't make that happen. But once you go into the smart region, where does the champion come at from the smart region standpoint? You mentioned the grouping of town count or of city managers that are working together, but now you've got 4 or 5 people in there to do that. So elaborate from there.
Sure, thank you. I think it's interesting because my experience is that some of us often that may be in smaller jurisdictions tend to sit back and wait for the bigger folks to take that step, or we look to them to be the lead. But I think what we've seen with the success, again, of our staff and their approach to this is that we can be the leader in this. And I would like to think that at this point, Morrisville is at least one of the leaders in Wake County from an innovation standpoint, from a bringing, again, you mentioned the different stakeholders. Our Smart Cities Steering Committee helps us tremendously with that. bringing those people together. And so then, again, we can do that, and we have the support, I believe, of our council to do that. That's always an important component. Because you may be sharing or even providing resources to other entities, but that's the future. I mean, anybody that doesn't think that regional approaches to government and to leadership, we're behind the times if you're not doing that. So I think that it is changing that mindset of we always wait perhaps in Wake County for Raleigh or for the county to take the lead. There are opportunities when some of the other municipalities can step up. Again, proper leadership, proper support, and the staff that knows what they're doing and is willing to take the step into that lead role, I think is critical.
If I can add to that, so we've in the Hampton Roads area, there are a dozen or so communities that have all come together very productively, and I think the way that evolved is it took 2 or 3 of the city managers to get together and say, yes, we ought to do this. And once that small group got together, nobody else wanted to be left out, right? So I think once you get that nucleus together, it can grow very rapidly, and it only takes a couple of leaders to take that first step.
Another question here.
Okay. Charlie Smith with Urban, this is loud, with Urban Integrated and Hewlett Packard. On the last part of the statement up there, it says, how do we build a smart region? We're working with over 200 cities across the U.S. right now. We've had contact with Morrisville. And Morrisville is really no different than most of the cities characteristically. My question to the panel is this. Let me make it real simple for you. If a city's serious about becoming a smart city, we offer a workshop. We don't do it for free. Typically costs about $25,000, and we bring our high-level team in there. People like our chief scientist who's got a PhD from MIT. And we spend a week, and we bring the department heads together and all the relevant people. And that siloed feature really breaks down over the course of that week in that workshop because they get to know each other in a different way. Anyway, what we do is we identify the pain points of the city and the goals and the aspirations, and at the end of the day, about 30 or 40 days later, you're presented with a rough blueprint of where you're at and the steps to get to the next level. My question to the panel is, why is it so difficult for cities and regions to take this small step that gives them a blueprint instead of we sit in a room with a bunch of people and we talk about all these lofty ideas, but my frustration, not just with this region, across the country, is that everybody wants to talk about these things, but then when it comes down to it, nobody's got the power to do anything. Most mayors can write a check for $25,000 without council approval. So my question for the panel is, how can we think differently about not just talking about these ideas, but actually being active in a powerful way to actually do something and pursue?
Thank you.
I'll take a quick whack at that. First thing I would say is even if it's not an issue of the cash, there's for public officials, there's a big risk factor, right? So I think getting most of your county or your locality staff together for a week and spending $25,000, that's a pretty big risk for most communities, right? I mean, and maybe not for larger cities, but for certainly a rural community, the budgets are strapped and everything, and people are busy doing their day job. So somebody has to advocate for the need for change, and it has to be somebody from the inside, right? I think you're lucky here to have great advocates locally, but that's not always the case. So it's really, my perception is it's a very one-on-one ground game to make that happen, and we're fortunate to be able to do that from my position, my staff. That's part of what we do is, hey, we can walk into a community as a trusted partner. We're from the state and we're here to help you, and take some of that financial risk and take some of that technology risk until a community's ready to kind of spin that up on their own.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a few more questions and we'll go back. I'm going to start with David I. One of the things that I've noticed is the global, how other nations are investing, globally in IoT and internet. One that comes to mind is India, who I had the honor of attending Prime Minister Modi's address to Congress and in June. And what's amazing, and that's where my parents are from, but just in the last few years, India has connected about 700 million to the internet. Today, 1.2 billion have a digital identity. And they've had 87 startups out of the 100,000 that just were started the last few years that are all billion-dollar companies. So, do you think that we also need to have a global perspective on this? And can you cite any examples globally of, what other regions are doing really well and what we can learn from?
Absolutely. Great question. So as a company leader for expanding what we've done overseas, actually in India is one of the areas our company has led the world. We have over a dozen smart cities. And some of these cities, challenges that you've cited that we've heard this morning, the challenges that are happening here, same types of challenges there we're seeing, but how do we overcome those? So one of the ways is being very open with the capability and coming in not from an OEM approach, but coming in not from a technology approach, but coming in from a people-centric approach. What do they want to achieve? How fast do they want to get there, beginning with the end in mind that I mentioned before? So cities like Pune and Bidkin, and most recently Lucknow. So these are cities where they've asked our company to come in, starting many, many years ago with some of these, build a way to drive crime down, make it easier for citizens for ingress and egress, make it easy with a one app or a one card application to move through the city, whether you're a citizen there, a visitor, or a tourist coming from somewhere else, keep safety at a high standard. The use of analytics, a lot of the things you saw this morning in the opening key remarks. So we've done this with these large cities, and some of these, like I mentioned, Bidkin, for example, they came out of the ground with almost no infrastructure. So we came in working with them in partnerships, strategic alliances, having these proof of concepts, having early discussions to be able to unite these different key stakeholders together so that we shorten the life cycle of getting them to the smart city. We drive their risk down. We provide a vendor-agnostic approach. And you guys remember seeing that slide Jim put up this morning with the 10,000 companies up there and everyone was getting blurred vision? Okay, so we have a slide like that. Although we're technology-driven because that's what, builds and brings the outcomes, bringing those cities together. So we're being recognized, we're in 70 countries, so we're being recognized as a smart city leader. And those challenges that we've overcome there, we want to try to help, drive those challenges down here as we expand across the U.S. markets as well. So we've done a lot of lessons learned, not enough time to dig into them now, but some amazing things we've done there that are bringing those cities not 10, 20 years to get there, but 1 to 4 years to get there, 1 to 6 years to get there. And they're achieving what they call the Star Wars era, the Star Trek era, and a lot of the capabilities so that the citizens don't have to think about the technology. It's just inherently there. It's intelligent. It's delivering the wisdom of the city and the wisdom of the occupants.
Good. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 more questions, open it back up to the audience. We've got a few more minutes, then I'll wrap up. What advice, I'm really excited about the startups that we're going to hear from soon. What advice do you have for tech startups in our region? Are any applications to be thinking about? Or trends that you're seeing?
Sure. There are a lot of applications. I think every startup has its own story, its own market niche that it's going after. What we found to be most effective is involving the end user community in co-development. We're starting to characterize kind of the test bed that we operate as a proving ground for technology. And, we learn so much, the community learns so much, and the entrepreneurs learn when they put their product in the real world for the first time. And for example, we had a smart lighting pilot that we did. So we just put 3 poles up with smart lighting, and purely by accident, it turned out that each of those 3 ended up with a different mechanism for powering the light. One was directly connected, one had a battery backup, one had a solar panel on it, and we hadn't planned that ahead of time. And the vendor was like, well, we never thought of that. but now they have 3 solutions that they can offer to communities depending on the particular situation. So I think that ability to try stuff out in the operational settings and then co-develop with the end user community is really effective.
Fantastic. By the way, we also have the mayor of Wake Forest here. I want to thank Mayor Vivian Jones for being here, and we have Holly Springs as well. So it's good to see some cities I know here. I guess my one question, this is my own question, and Mary Ann Baldwin and I were talking about how we really needed a moment after we saw Clara to really sit down and soak it in. My gosh, this is quite amazing. Now I wish I had Clara, we had Clara so that residents wouldn't call me all the time with questions like, Steve, when does yard waste pick up? Or, how big can the wood, when we have shrubs, the twine and whatever, if they could just go to an AI agent, it would make life a lot easier and reduce the amount of emails that a lot of us get. But what were your thoughts about that, right? I mean, in terms of like, what is this going to mean? And Brandon, I'm going to start with you, just in terms of like, when you saw that, the resident calling in and asking questions, do you see that being something that, local governments could look to in terms of their smart city strategies?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's more efficient. It gives us greater flexibility. So, for example, in our community, we're approximately between 46 and 47% Asian Indian. So we unfortunately don't have a lot of staff that speak Hindi. And so we're doing a lot of work in that context and participating in a language access collaborative with UNC. But the ability to have that type of communication ability would be fantastic, because one of the things we find, it's not just the people that reach out to us and have challenges in communicating with us, it's the people that don't even reach out because they don't think they'll be able to communicate with us. So as you can use technology to overcome that, I mean, that just speaks to the power of what we could do, and it certainly reduces staff time, far more efficient in most cases than a phone call. Could be 24 hours a day. Just tremendous advantages for municipal application.
Well, just don't create AI council members, although that might make your life a lot easier.
We'll give it a little while.
That's for anyone in the state of North Carolina. What are your thoughts about AI? Just from your perspective.
So that's a loaded question.
I mean, just any kind of thoughts of how it fits into what we're talking about.
So I think we've been working with AI for quite a long time, and what we see happening is the automation of thought is entering into the full movement of AI. So instead of just knowing about someone or about a specific situation, AI is helping drive understanding the intent. So beyond what the about is, it's digging deeper into the intent. And then it can craft integration back with cloud support engines that will drive a solution and put that in place to help prevent situations, like prevent bottlenecks, prevent crimes. It covers the what ifs. But it also helps with the increasing movement of safety and security all the way around. Because as we saw this morning again, in Jim's presentation, those bubbles of how you get down into the compute level, it's becoming fully automated in such a way where you won't have to think about it. When we get to the point where we're not having to think about the technology, things like seeing a route that Google Maps sends you on a different route to speed you to a location and it's green, it might be green because they're building a train track there and that's why there's no traffic there. And then you don't know that till you're there and you're like, what's going on? I got to turn around. So, it's a simple analogy, but these are some things that AI is going to help address, as well as the language, automatic, translation of language through an app. So integrating with the use cases, but also integrating very well with what the intent is, projecting that forward fast enough to where it's giving you a cleaner, faster outcome.
Fantastic. AI in terms of startups, do you think?
Yeah, so, and I will say I wrote my first paper on AI 45 years ago at the AI lab, so I'm a little bit cynical. There's huge potential, obviously, right? And I think a number of people are trying different aspects of artificial intelligence. From a governmental point of view, we're working to help define the policy and the implementation limitations at the state level in Virginia. What kinds of systems are reasonable to implement from a government point of view? What are the limits? And, you know, there are known issues with, for example, chatbots making up information that turns out not to be true, right? And I think back to the theme of starting small, you know, taking those first steps. So, for example, if we're looking at automating 911 calls, 911 dispatch, there's a very constrained vocabulary there. There's a very constrained set of mappings from what a citizen could call in and tell you to the set of actions that you'll do. So it's a bounded problem, and I think in those kinds of situations, AI can really provide many of the advantages that we're talking about. When I look more broadly at, you know, if I have a data system and an AI entity comes knocking on the door and says, hey, I want access to your data, how do I know what that system is? How do I identify it? How do I validate it? How do I understand that it hasn't gone bad in the 6 months since it's been released into the wild? And so I think there are a lot of open questions, and I think it's very appropriate from a government point of view to go slowly and you know, kind of try to build that understanding as we go.
Yeah, fantastic. We have 3 more minutes. So what I'll say about that is, you know, when I interviewed John, I wrote an article on WL TechWire. What was interesting is his advice to entrepreneurs was there's a few applications that are prime time, right? Call centers, automating that. Find those applications, fit into your business model, and then deliver the best service to your customers. So I think that kind of model could actually be applied to cities, right, eventually, for our smart city strategy. So maybe we'll do a follow-up panel on that. And there's a lot of challenges of AI. I guess, are there any final questions before we allow the panelists to close out with final thoughts? One final question.
Hello, I'm Adam Williams from AT&T FirstNet. We have a lot of value, you know, a lot of customers, you know, in the room here, and we really respect your relationship. My question is, what expectations do you have from a connectivity or tech company would you have a relationship with to provide education on IoT?
So I'll start with the example. We're doing a lot with the use of drones and introducing those to the public. So we've started certainly to support emergency management, starting to deliver medicines to remote communities, those kinds of things. The critical aspect of the partnership is for the drone operators or the manufacturers to do that public outreach and to help build that community trust, right? I mean, the first reaction in the communities we went into was we don't want those things because they're gonna be watching me in my backyard kind of stuff. And I think the ability of the industry partners to demonstrate those positive community use cases has been critical. And I think that's true kind of across the board.
Any final thoughts before we allow each panelist to just give 30 seconds, just wrap up of what you'd like us to take away? And we really want to thank you for being on the panel. Brandon.
Thank you. Again, I think, you know, get engaged. I think ask peer communities if you are in a municipality, you know, what is someone else doing? How did you get started? How did you do this? What's working and what's not working? You know, learn from each other's successes and challenges as you go. And then I was really, you know, listening to the AI conversation. The other thing I think I need to mention is just also use caution. And I think I'm preaching to the choir, but, you know, over-reliance on AI is a real concern of mine. And that's at all various levels of the organization. But, you know, one little example, and this isn't AI per se, but, you know, police officers, firefighters now rely on their laptops to, you know, pop up not only with a call for service, but here's the map of how you get there. And so, you know, when a police officer comes in one day and says, well, my laptop's working, I don't know how I can work today. And that happened to me in Garner. I may have given them a look that they didn't like because I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, a little while ago, we had like, you know, not a lot of equipment at all other than a flashlight and a baton and, you know, a handgun, and it seemed to work okay. But I just relate that back to even in municipal government and even other operations, we want to make sure that it's a tool, but not the tool.
Yeah, a tool. Yeah, that's right. Any final insights as we wrap up?
I think, you know, in the space you asked me about India, you know, so we see a lot of things going on around the world as a company, and myself included, because, you know, other communities globally, they're taking steps very quick. So they're not waiting at all. You know, you can go out in the middle of the jungles of Australia or out in the deserts, and the guys got iPhones and everything. So we want to try to expedite it. Don't let technology stay in the way. Don't worry about what technology do I need to get this outcome. Partnering up with strategic partners like myself, with our companies, with municipalities together, we specialize in being able to drive that risk down, find the right partnerships, or we have them in place already, and remove a lot of the minutia that is driven into all these millions of technologies, systems, capabilities. So don't be afraid to reach out, to an SI, an MSI that has experience, they're vendor agnostic like ourselves, that are able to bring the value of what your vision is and how to capture that and how to strategically align with partnerships. I mentioned the partnerships of a utility with a telecom company, with the cloud company, with the city, county, all these four things together. Standing by themselves, they're in silos because they're each going after their own needs. But partnering up with the right partnerships to help drive that timeline down and keep the risk low. Just don't be afraid. Go ahead and jump in and let the partners work with you to bring that to bear.
Final thought before we lunch.
Yeah, so, just over a month ago, the FEMA administrator, Deanna Criswell, gave an awesome speech to the National Emergency Management Association. It's worth checking it out. Part of that was her quote, and I'm paraphrasing, "What keeps me up at night is the threat from nation-state actors and what they're threatening for our homeland security." And she went on to say the way we're going to combat that as a company, as a country, is collaborating, is working together more closely across industry, across government, across local government, state and national government. And the mechanism to do that is better information sharing. So, to me, that's why I'm here. That's one of the things that's driving me these days. I hope we can, between Virginia and North Carolina, between our communities and the communities here, how can we make that happen? And we're all in on that.
Well, thank you so much. So as we close out, I just want to thank the City of Raleigh, John Holden, and everybody for putting together this wonderful conference. I think it's the beginning of developing a playbook on how we can become the smartest region in the country and how North Carolina can become the smartest state in the country. And maybe that's something the ex-governor of North Carolina focuses on. But with that being said, let's give a round of applause to our panel. Smart state. Okay.
Thank you so much to the esteemed panel. Very much appreciate it. Learned quite a bit. We do have lunch, and not only do we have a free lunch, but our lunch keynote is about all the money that is available to us in order to be able to move some of these things forward. So come on into the main session area, learn about how you can get some money. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I was way above my pay grade on that one.
Hey, thank you all. Some chocolates?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, thank you.